Thank you for watching us on YouTube. But did you know that if you're on the go, you can get the full show as a podcast now? You can get our morning breakdown of the most important topics facing our country, news not being covered by the mainstream media, interviews with change-making progressives, and info on what you can actually do about all this. Search for The Damage Report on your favorite podcast app and subscribe so you know when new episodes are ready to go. Brazil recently had the first round of their presidential voting that resulted in Jair Bolsonaro, the far-right candidate, receiving 46% of the vote. That means that there will actually be a runoff election because he did not break the 50% threshold necessary for him to simply clinch the presidential position outright. Now, him succeeding and far exceeding the vote share of the second place candidate is worrisome because he has said a lot of pretty scary things and he represents a potential backsliding of democracy in Brazil. Now, that is my position. Thankfully, the media, I think, has been pretty good in making that clear, and considering how generally uninterested American media is in what happens in the domestic politics of other countries, that's actually surprising. But not universally good news, because the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal has decided to, it's generous to say, whitewash his record, if not pretty much outright endorse Jair Bolsonaro in advance of this runoff election. I want to read 3 quotes from their editorial, which of course you can read yourself if you'd like. They say, and look at how they pitch this. Remember we were talking earlier this week about how most of right-wing thought these days is wanting to make the libs cry, basically? You'll catch a little bit of that in this editorial from the Wall Street Journal. Global progressives are having an anxiety attack over the near triumph Sunday of Brazil's conservative presidential candidate, Jair Bolsonaro. After years of corruption and recession, apparently millions of Brazilians think an outsider is exactly what the country needs. Maybe they know more than the world scolds. So those of us who are worried about another dictatorship in Brazil are the world scolds now. And there are 2 awesome things there, or actually 3. We're having an anxiety attack over concerns over backsliding on democracy. Seems like the sort of thing that you probably want to have an anxiety attack over. Second of all, he's conservative, just conservative. We're gonna take a look at his record and you be the judge of whether that's an apt depiction of his actual political ideology. Yeah, and let's see, third, that they need an outsider. So I want to read the second quote. Remember, this is from the same editorial. Mr. Bolsonaro, who has spent 27 years in Congress, let's pause right there. They just called him a political outsider who has been in Congress for a good portion of a lifetime, actually. But fine, they can square those 2 things. He's best understood as a conservative populist who promises to make Brazil great for the first time. The 63-year-old is running on traditional values and often says politically incorrect things about identity politics that inflame his opponents. So we're gonna give you examples of these politically incorrect things about identity politics. And again, I want you to remember this quote and see if their depiction of what he's doing is honest, or if they are attempting to completely whitewash his record to convince you that he's not that far out of the mainstream, he's not so bad. But third quote here, and this is where we're gonna transition into some of the things that he said, is opponents claim Mr. Bolsonaro's praise for the military, and sometimes for the military rule from 1964 to 1985, pre-democracy in Brazil, by the way, suggests he is a threat to democracy. But he isn't proposing to change the Constitution, which constrains the military at home. And this is where the truth comes in, because first of all, we're not gonna read the quote, but their next paragraph actually says how he plans to change the Constitution. So again, I think that they gave like the even paragraphs to one author and the odd paragraphs to another, and they didn't actually talk during it. But there they say, oh, his praise for the military, they say it's a threat to democracy. Well, look, the editorial board for the Wall Street Journal can't actually be bothered to look at what he has actually said, so let me do that for them. I will read some quotes from Jair Bolsonaro, and you say if libs are being hyperbolic in saying that he's potentially a threat to democracy. First of all, he said this: I am in favor of a dictatorship. That's a strong one. It almost seems like perhaps he's not pro-democracy. But lest you believe that, let's move on. He also said, we will never resolve serious national problems with this irresponsible democracy. That seems like the sort of thing that you might want to reference in your editorial, Wall Street Journal. So just to be clear, he wants a dictatorship and he considers democracy irresponsible. Yeah, I would say that liberals being concerned about the future of democracy in Brazil seems warranted considering the words of the actual guy you are purporting to profile in the Wall Street Journal. Let's see, he has said more though. He has called Brazil under dictatorship a quote, glorious period in Brazil's history, and said that the only mistake the dictatorship made was preferring torture over outright killing. So best case scenario, you can say that that is an anti-torture position, sort of. But not really. So a glorious period. No, when they were doing mass killings, roundups, death squads, stuff like that, that's not an actual mistake. They should have done more outright killing. But lest you believe that he is only interested in a dictatorship in Brazil, he actually likes them in other places as well. In 1998, he praised Augusto Pinochet, the former dictator of Chile, saying the regime should have killed more people. I mean, look, I think that's unfair because they really tried to kill a lot of people. Like, come on, dude. In the 1990s, he said that if he's ever elected president, remember, he might be president soon, he would stage a military coup of his own on the very first day. I will say, if you're interested in an outsider, out-of-the-box thinking, it's not generally the person who just won power in a country that stages a coup. But I get where he's going with it. He would not be happy with the sort of powers normally given to a democratically elected president in Brazil. He instead wants absolute power as a dictator. So again, they claim that he's a threat to democracy. He claims he's a threat to democracy. He promises that he's a threat to democracy, but the Wall Street Journal can't actually be bothered to quote the guy himself. Now look, this is by far the biggest issue with Bolsonaro, is that he apparently wants to, as is often the case around the world, ride into power through democracy and then shut the door after he's in and get rid of it and remove democracy as a future way that the people could get power back again. But there are other concerns with him as well. He is an incredibly, in their words, I'm a lib, so I think he's offensive and says things about identity politics. Okay, well, look, they don't actually quote him there. They don't give you any evidence to decide whether they're being honest there. So why don't we read some of his quotes and see if he's just saying politically incorrect things. Here's a few quotes of many on homosexuality. He says, quote, if I see two men kissing in the street, I will beat them. If your child starts to become like that, a little gay, you take a whip and you change their behavior. He said he'd rather have a son die in an accident than turn out to be gay. And well, I guess it would save him the trouble of having to whip the kid. And he said, quote, liberal habits and working women have caused an increase in the number of gay people. For context, he said that to Ellen Page, who is a gay actress. So that's on homosexuality. So what does he think about women? He said to a female legislator, I would not rape you, you don't merit that. And then after people were frustrated with him for saying that the only reason he won't rape a woman is because she's not hot enough to deserve it, he went on Twitter and said that he had put her in her, quote, proper place. Now here's the thing, he is commonly called in Western media Brazil's Trump or tropical Trump, a label that he doesn't seem to like, although we'll go into some of the more evidence on that. But I wanna read some of his quotes and you'll sort of get how philosophically they're kind of similar. He called the United Nations International Human Rights Day, quote, the day of losers. So he didn't say losers and haters, to be fair, but he did say losers. He was worried about people from Haiti coming in and spreading disease, which is something Donald Trump has said. He called refugees from Syria the scum of the earth, which might actually be farther than what Donald Trump has said on them. Although to be fair, he does want to bar them from actually coming here, and he wants to condemn them to dying in their own country. On race, in 2011, during an appearance on a television program, he was asked by a famous Afro-Brazilian actress, Preta Gil, what he would do if his son fell in love with a black woman. And he replied, I am not going to discuss promiscuity. He then added that he doesn't run that risk because his sons, quote, are very well raised, telling the actress that they, quote, don't live in the type of environment that you unfortunately do. Wow, that is something. So issues with homosexuality, refugees, weird views on disease, race, women, very misogynistic, all of that. But like I said, he does reject the idea that he's Brazil's Trump. Although, to be fair, in 2016, he said, I like Trump's position. The only difference is that I'm richer. He's not politically correct, and that's why he's massacred by left-wing media. So I like that the guy who wants a dictatorship and a military coup casually throws around the word massacre. That seems like a bad call. But again, to return to the Wall Street Journal, This is what he has actually said, and I would imagine that an organization with the history and the resources and the manpower that you have, that on the odd opportunity, which does not often come, where you decide to effectively endorse a foreign leader as the next president of that country, you could at the very least do a little bit of research and be minimally intellectually honest with your readership about what this person actually represents. But of course, that's not what you're interested in. You have a narrative to push. And by the way, that narrative barely has anything to do with Brazil. Do you honestly think that they are that invested in the future leadership of Brazil? I'm sure that they're fine with it and they don't mind a far right winger getting in there if he stops some left wing Brazilian from becoming president. But this is about the normalization, not of Jair Bolsonaro, but of leaders like him. This is for the far-right leadership that's trying to move up in the ranks in Europe. This is for Donald Trump and others like him in the US as well. Because if you can get the American people to accept Jair Bolsonaro, a guy who says he wants a military coup, he wants to whip gays, and he will rape only the hottest women, then they will accept any sort of white nationalist, racist a-hole in America as well. And I believe that that is the goal of that editorial in the Wall Street Journal. Thank you very much for watching this clip from The Damage Report. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell on YouTube to get notifications of our new videos. And of course, you can catch the full Damage Report live every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on TYT Network on YouTube TV.